indicate to me if you have a question, and we'll try and get around to everybody here in the next 20 to 25 minutes.
Good morning, everybody. This availability is not going to satisfy anybody. And that's not the intention of it. There's no satisfaction in the situation that we find ourselves in currently. And that situation, visually to me, we're a better hockey team. When I sit in the press box and watch our team play, visually, we're a better hockey team. And I think our most ardent detractor would have to admit that we are a better hockey team visually. But there isn't any tangible evidence of any of that improvement, and that's what's so difficult for everybody to swallow. In particular, the fans, the faithful fans that flock to Rexall night in and night out to see some material evidence of improvement, and there just hasn't been that level of improvement. Everything in our organization currently, as you might imagine, is being evaluated and has been for the last, since we took over. There has been, in the 18 or 19 months that I've been on the job, there's been intense evaluation to a lot of aspects of our organization, and we can talk about those a little bit later. From the players that we bring through the door, maybe the most important thing that our organization does, and every layer in our organization serves that interest, and that's to bring the highest quality player through the door. And that's certainly an area that has to improve. The coaching, the way that our players are directed on and off the ice is certainly under scrutiny, as is the performance of the players. And when we talk about coaching, there's been 4 coaching changes here in the last number of years. I've been around for at least 2 of them. I've been around for 2 of them. And the messaging to the players has been very similar. And the accountability to the players to execute on the ice has to improve. And we talk about our team being better visually. Why aren't the results following that? And it's, in my mind, it's the execution of our team at critical moments. It's the execution on the ice. It's the turnovers. And it's virtually been the same message since I've been here for 2 years, or close to 2 years. It's the on-ice decisions. It's the competitiveness. We've talked at length since I took over about bringing in more competitive people, which has been one of the primary focuses of my tenure as general manager here, is to bring in more competitive people. And we're seeing evidence of that in Oklahoma City. We've got bigger bodies. They're not ready now. And we've got to be patient with those players and let those players develop. But for me, we could bring in a 5th coach to deliver the same message to this group. And the thing that gives me optimism is that I'm hearing the same messaging from the players that I haven't heard in the last number of years. The players are holding themselves accountable. I think you have to credit the current coaching staff for that and getting that messaging through. The players that we've identified and committed to long-term have more accountability on the ice. I'm seeing that. There's some growth. I'm reasonably satisfied that there's progress on those players. Did we underestimate the amount of time that it would take for those players to develop into top-flight NHL players? Yes, we did. But as long as there's progress, which I've seen in terms of physical growth, performance growth, and maybe most importantly, accountability growth. And those things are essential. And as painful as this is, I'll open it up to questions after this, but As painful as this process is, we feel that it's a necessary step to get us to the next level. And we're behind in our timeline. We understand the frustration of our fans. We understand the frustration of everybody surrounding the team. We are behind in our timeline, but the plan has not changed for us. We have to make decisions, and I have to make decisions as a manager relative to where we are, not where we want to be or where we should be. I'm making those decisions relative to where we are currently. There's a lot of talk about why aren't you making potential deals, why aren't you trading players, why don't you root the core out? Because I don't think the core needs to be rooted out. The core needs to continue to develop. There's got to be growth internally, and trades in today's NHL are very difficult to consummate. And you try and find teams and organizations that are in similar situations, of which there are a few, and try and make some lateral deal that's going to try and spur the performance level of your group. And so far, I have not been able to find a deal that makes sense to me to satisfy our short-term objectives, which is to get better as quickly as we can, or our long-term objectives, which remain the same. The long-term objective here, as I said last year, is to draft and develop players, and all those aspects of our organization are under intense scrutiny, and we've worked hard over the last number of years to improve our processes in terms of our drafting. There's still a lot of scrutiny with the way that we draft players, so that's ongoing, and our development. We've got we've piled a lot of resources into development, and we eventually think that they're going to provide a better player through the door, so we can improve.
Okay.
All right.
We're again, please identify yourself and take questions for the next 15 or 20 minutes here. And we'll start with Gene.
Craig, Gene, Red Space Sports. Good morning. Just in listening to that opening sort of monologue, are you hoping that the team will have enough success that you can stay with your plan, or if things don't change in, let's say a month or 6 weeks, might you have to revisit some things that you don't necessarily want to do but feel like you might have to do?
Well, I feel like we're plagued by inconsistency right now in our level of execution. And you look to, when I say visually better, you look to the Winnipeg game, which was a real positive for us. And we did a lot of things right. We played a smarter, more mature game than we do normally. And we're in the game, ready to win the game. Nashville was the same thing. We played a smarter game. We managed the puck better. We went to the tough areas of the ice better. We finished our checks, which are things that are lacking. And I'm not naive enough to think there isn't going to have to be personnel change here over time. But currently, for me, the focus is on helping this group of players execute at a level, because the execution is there for you every night. The execution is there. The work ethic is there. And the competitiveness should be there. It's there for you if you want to tap into it every night. And until we tap into those three pillars, we're going to continue to go up and down. And we won't be able to move forward until we have a greater level of consistency in those three areas.
Jason?
Craig, Jason Greger, TSN. You talk about the development of your young players, and you were maybe surprised it's taken this long. If you look then at the start of the year, your coach said you only had 2 NHL centers. Is that obviously a mistake then, in hindsight, going in only with 2 NHL centers? And are you looking to address that before?
It's I wouldn't say it's a mistake. I mean, I think I'm left with alternatives. What are my alternatives? And it'd be foolish to not have tried to find another centerman to come in here. But based on the asking price, we're not in a position to pay the asset ask for a positional bias right now. We're not in that position. We just don't have the number of assets that we can go out there and deploy. There's 4 or 5 players that would bring us significant value. And we solve one problem and we create another. And I just haven't been in a position where I've had that opportunity to bring in a centerman. There's no quick or easy fix to some of these positional gaps. There's been a lot of open boxes when we go over our lineup year in and year out that we're trying to fill, and there still are some open boxes, and but there are less open boxes. But there's no quick fix to filling a second line centerman that can come in here. And I mean, if we could find the player at the right price, would it move us forward? Absolutely. But there's no quick fix to it that I've found.
Terry and then John.
Terry Jones, Edmonton Sun. Can you characterize where your owner is at right now with what's happened this year, and how much time that you think you and your coach and everybody that's trying to get this thing back on the rails have to do what you're talking about doing going forward?
Well, I would characterize the owner as upset. He's like a lot of our fans, times 10. He's very upset with what's happened. We've brought in Bob Nicholson. Daryl brought in Bob Nicholson to oversee all levels of management, myself included, and that's an ongoing evaluation too that's happening internally. So that's where Daryl's at.
How much time do you think you have in this situation to get it to where you have progress?
Well, I would say that I'm basing all my decisions on what's best for the long-term vitality of this organization, and not trying to think that I'm on a shorter timeline. I'm going to make decisions based on what's best for this organization long-term. It's been a painful process, as we're all fully aware of, but we're going to stay on task to draft and develop players and develop ourselves internally, because there's no other way.
John and then Jim.
John McKenna from Edmonton Journal. Unfortunately, this is now sort of an annual event, this particular get-together, and which I'm sure you're very acutely aware of. But what factors or cluster of factors would it take for voices in your group to realize that this plan actually may not be on track at all, and that it's not more time and more maturity, but a completely different outlook?
Okay, and what would that outlook be? I mean, in all due respect, outside of changing everybody, and that might be the outlook that you're professing, but what would that strategy be? I'm the manager of the team. So is it time to punt out the core of these players at 23 and 24 years old as they're developing? What we've tried to do, or what I've tried to do, and I'm accountable for it all. I mean, I've switched out 14 or 15 players in the 18 months that I've been on the job. And what I think I have now is a group that's capable of growth. And what I think I inherited was a group that was on the demise. And so, but to my evaluation of this group is that they're still developing, and it's taken time for these guys to develop. And you look, I mean, outside of the real generational players, the Taves, Kane, Crosby, who arrive at the NHL as a pretty finished product. Stamkos took a few years. It takes time for these players to grow and develop into dominant players. You look to Vancouver and the Sedins. They were slow in their development. I remember when we signed Hork to a longer-term deal. He said at that time that no way was he going to take any less money than what the Sedins were making. And then at 25, the Sedins became great players, and they were great players for 10 years. So I know we're all getting close to reaching our choke point, But that doesn't mean that we're going to punt out our 3 best players.
Jim?
Mr. Matheson, you make a mistake drafting Meliaki Pops. Offensively, he seems to be regressing rather than getting better.
Well, I would argue with that. And I mean, my intention here is not to talk about individual players. I'll talk in generalities of our team. I'll talk about our forward group. I will address your question, but in my mind, I'll talk about the defense, I'll talk about the power play, I'll talk about special teams. But in my mind, I'm not here to criticize individual players because it's not going to help their performance. There's enough negativity and scrutiny on our group that we want to keep all those discussions eyeball to eyeball with our personnel and have those internally. I will say with Yak that I've seen quite a bit of growth out of him. And I think he's competing harder. I know he's competing harder. Winnipeg's a great example. He played a good hockey game. He's competing harder. He's learning the game on the other side of the puck, which he's never had to do throughout his career. He's getting more chances. He's getting more prominent responsibility and ice time. And you know, at the time we drafted Yak, he was everybody was on side with it. He was a player with incredible offensive potential. Offense, as I've said many times before, offense is at a premium, and I still believe strongly that he's going to develop into a good player.
Reed and then Vin.
Hey, Craig, Reed Wilkins from Ched. You know, Dallas Aikens has only won about a third of his games as head coach, and there's been some dry spells in there. So what growth, if any, have you seen in him as a coach, and how far away is he from being the NHL coach that you would really want him to be?
Well, when we asked Dallas to commit to us 18 months ago, he had plenty of opportunity for obvious reasons. He's a sharp guy and was a very sought-after coach at the time. And I felt at that time, as I do now, that he's a good role model for our players. He's a passionate guy about the game. And he's evolving as a coach. I think your question is where has he evolved, and I mean the way he deals with this situation. I think his resiliency as a coach. I think it's no easy feat to have had the record that we've had at this time and still, in my mind, have the support of the whole group in there. And I think that's my coaching is under scrutiny. Make no mistake about that. Coaching is under scrutiny. But in my mind, at this time, to make a coaching change, we've changed assistant coaches. We've brought in co-coaches. We've brought in former head coaches. 4 coaching changes. And it's, as I said earlier in my opening comments, those coaches were all delivering the same message. And we need a higher level of execution. And I feel our team is evolving to the point where the expectation internally from our players is that they do have to execute at a higher level. And that gives me optimism that this thing is going to move forward.
Vin and then Kevin.
Darwell, CBC. Earlier this week, your captain called out, well, he didn't point out any players, but he called their effort a joke and said, you know, there's players moping around in the dressing room. Are you concerned at all or worried that there may be a bit of a losing culture embedded with some of the core, maybe some of the players in that dressing room, just with all the losses that year after year kind of having happened?
Well, firstly, it's an emotional game. And I think the game you're referring to is the Phoenix game, which was not a great effort by our hockey team. And very difficult for everybody to swallow, especially our leadership and our captain. I think that any time, and as I referred to mistakes being made on the ice, we're making mistakes that aren't being reciprocated by the more veteran teams. we give the opposition opportunities that the opposition doesn't give us. And as close as the games have been, that undermines our ability to win. And I think what Andrew said in the dressing room was an honest description of how a lot of us were feeling, and I hope all the other leaders in that room were feeling the same way. And you know, we lack at times, and what's it going to take to get this group to the level of urgency that we need? And as I said before, there's got to be personnel changes and more competitive people brought in over time, but we need this group. And I want the group to know at the end of this that the emphasis is largely on them, and that includes the coaches, to try and get us to a level of play and performance that we can have success in the NHL. And a lot of times our group, for whatever reason, does not exhibit the urgency that the situation requires. And that's the work ethic, and that's the competitiveness that we need at a greater level out of this group. And we have to be the shortcomings in our team game. We're very seldom on the dial on the competitive moments of the game, the critical moments of the game. We don't control the critical moments. We play well in spurts, but when the game's on the line, we absorb, the opposition normally dictates the pace and the tempo of the play, and that's got to change.
So are you saying regardless of who those players might be who aren't being competitive or who aren't whooping?
Well, I think it's internally that accountability is good. The coaches can go in there and talk about competitiveness, getting to the net, but there's got to be a level of internal accountability in there. And, you know, every good team's got it. And I feel like Andrew's comments were emotional at the time, but they were directed in the right frame of mind at the right points, and we need a more competitive group. And at times we get it, but it's just not there consistently enough for us to have consistent success and be able to get off this treadmill that we're all on right now.
I'm going to take 2 or 3 more. Kevin, Mark.
Kevin Carey's Global, you mentioned draft and development several times, but I'm not all on your watch, Craig, but in the last 10 years, outside of the first round, you guys have only drafted really one semi-impact player in Jeff Petrie. Other than that, nothing. How much has that stunted this organization?
Well, it undermines the performance of everything we do on and off the ice, and it has to get better. And from the minute we took over, we focused on improving our draft record. You're right, there were 2 players in our lineup the other night in Winnipeg that were drafted outside of the first round. So we're acutely aware of our former inadequacies of our draft after the first round. And we've worked hard to improve all our processes in terms of our drafting. We're more regionally focused. There's more of an emphasis on getting to know the players, interviewing the players. We've integrated a lot of analytics into our decision making. We've integrated technology into our video scouting. We've got more management now in the field communicating with our scouts and watching games. We've got a draft philosophy since I took over. We've got a draft philosophy in an effort to improve our draft record. Last year's draft is tough to evaluate because we didn't have a second rounder, we didn't have a third rounder. The draft before, I think we've added a lot of pieces and a lot of things that we needed. But on the draft, we are not in a position today, and I want to be clear about this to our fans, that we are not in a position today to be spending future assets to try and prop this group up currently. When we get to the point where we're competing for a playoff spot, at that point we'll entertain thoughts of expending future assets and draft choices. We can't get to the draft next year in a similar situation without having our draft choices. So I want to be clear about that. We're going to continue to draft and keep our draft choices.
Mark, I have 2 questions. You just described your amateur scouting. Mark Spector from Sportsnet. You just talked about your amateur scouting. It hasn't been very good. Your pro scouting has not been great either. You want to bring in big, aggressive people, but but you end up with guys like Belov, like Brevishkov, like Nick Keaton, who is being paid like a first pairing defenseman and isn't one. What are you going to do about your pro scouting? Who's responsible for it?
Well, I'll argue with you about Nikitin. I think Nikitin, when you go to the UFA market, which was extensively what we did with Nikitin, we needed help on defense. There was no question we needed help. We needed to stopgap our defensive position before Darnell Nurse, Oscar Clefbaum, and those players are ready to get into our lineup. Clefbaum quite clearly is ready now in the way that he's played. Nikitin to me is an NHL talent. I mean, he's been up and down in terms of his performance level, but I don't think there's anybody that would question he's an NHL defenseman. He's played at the Olympics level. He's played at a very high level of hockey. He's been inconsistent in his performance here so far, but noticeably absent the other night in Winnipeg when he left the game with a back injury in the last period and a half. We sorely missed having him there to make plays. He's a big, strong guy. As for the pro scouting, our story now, our pro scouting and the players that we bring in free agency should and has been better the last year or two. Prior to that, we were left with guys that had very little alternative on where they were going to go. Now, when I'm recruiting these free agents, I've got a much better story to tell. I mean, we haven't realized any portion of all the upside that I forecast for these players at this point, but we have a better story to tell. And Pouliot had a lot of opportunity. We sold him on the opportunity here. You have to pay in free agency to get these players. He's a player that we think has fit in well. Mark Fain is a player that I like a lot. I love the character that he brings. We needed help on defense. But having said all that, I think that area of our game has improved. That area of our, the ability for us to go out and sign free agents has definitely improved. But every aspect of our organization is under scrutiny, including pro scouting.
You and Kevin and Scott Housen have been off and on and in and out running this organization for most of a decade.
I've been on the job. I've been on the job for 18 months. So you want to lock me in as a guy. I coached the team for a long time, but I had nothing to do with management. So don't lock me in into a situation of power and influence in the management level of this organization. I've been on the job for 20 months and 18 or 20 months. I'm going to get to the bottom of it. And this is part of the process of getting to the bottom of it. We've made an incredible amount of change, tumultuous change in our organization. And in my mind, we're all frustrated. I'm pissed off. Nobody lives it more than me. And our fans are pissed off. But we're going to get to the bottom of it. We're going to continue to do rational, make rational, responsible decisions in spite of the situation that we're in. And that's the leadership I'm going to provide.
Last question.
Dean Miller with TSN 1260. Just wondering if you guys have talked about it yet or considering sending Leon Draisaitl to the World Juniors?
We've talked about it. I've been happy. The one factor with Leon is his own personal development. And that's the singular most important decision for us. And whether we send him, it's unlikely that we'll send him based on the way that he's played. I thought he played well again in Winnipeg, and I'm satisfied that he is developing.
Craig, I've got one more if you don't mind.
Yeah.
One of the storylines this year has been the big mistake happening at inopportune times and similar players continuing to make that mistake over and over. It maybe points to some to accountability and that maybe not being held accountable or the mistakes wouldn't keep happening. How is that not an issue of coaching?
Well, one philosophy doesn't reach each player. Having been a coach, every time, if you're a talented player, every time you turn the puck over, you come to the bench, and the coach yells at you. So you don't have the confidence that you need to make plays. And where we struggle at times is finding that balance internally on, and we're getting better at it. I mean, in my mind, you've got to treat each player differently. When I had Alex Hemsky, I couldn't yell at him every time he came to the bench after he turned the puck over. And but there was a balance. He's got to be held accountable. And I think you guys are close enough to the group, the guys that cover our team day in and day out, to recognize that that level of accountability is improving. And it starts internal. It starts with the coaching staff identifying these situations, but it doesn't end with the coaching staff. It's got to come internally from that group. And Taylor's got to be a voice in that. Jordan Eberle's got to be a voice in that. Jordan Eberle's got to be a voice in our leadership group. He's got to be demanding more of the team. Taylor's got to be demanding more of the team. And when you start demanding more of the team, it has a residual effect in your decision making on the ice. And when that starts to happen at a greater level than what has happened up until this point, I think we'll make a turn.
Thank you very much, Craig. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.